our purpose as a company is to help people grow, and growth is uncomfortable. That's one of the things that makes us not a fit for everybody, is that we're going to push people to be better professionals, and also we hope better people. And we think those things can coincide, especially if you're going to be a leader. Like, you have to set good examples with how you operate and the acumen of what you do, but also how you operate as a person and a human and your character.
Hi, I'm Kortney Harmon, Director of Industry Relations at Crelate.
This is the Full Desk Experience's Industry Spotlight Series. Welcome to the Full Desk Experience, where we deep dive into the stories of innovative leaders who are reshaping the business landscape in the talent industry. I'm your host, Kortney Harmon, and today we're joined by Aaron Opalewski, a dynamic entrepreneur who is making waves in our industry. Aaron is the CEO and founder of Spark Companies. It's headquartered in Troy, Michigan. Since founding the company in 2013, he's built a remarkable ecosystem of businesses under the Spark umbrella. With over 17 years of experience in staffing and recruiting, Aaron has impacted the growth of hundreds of companies and helped tens of thousands of people find their career paths. So today, we're going to explore how Aaron has transformed his business model, achieving remarkable growth, maintained a steadfast commitment, and his core mission of creating opportunities for others. He has truly a unique approach to his client relationships and his vision for the future of our industry. So with that being said, Aaron, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you on this side of the seat versus you asking the questions. I get to ask you the questions. So thank you for joining us today.
Kortney, thanks for having me. I'm a fan of the podcast, and some of our team shares your episodes back and forth. And I didn't sit in on this, but like in one of our last sales meetings, like the homework was to listen to one of your episodes. So I'm a fan, and it's fun to be on the show. So thanks for having me.
I love it. And I love that you A, there's homework, but B, that the podcast is that. So thank you. For our listeners, obviously, you and I have gotten to chat a couple times at this point. Tell our listeners a little about Aaron and his journey and the Spark Companies. So give us an overview of both of those things.
Yeah, I'll go quick on this, but I've been in the industry for 17 years. Prior to being in staffing, as is most people's story, I didn't know anything about staffing. I was doing personal training, and happened to start training someone that was a director at Aerotech, at the time, and got to know them. And I was still in college and working to put myself through college, and we got to know each other, and ultimately that led to me interviewing there. Took a position with Aerotech in October of 2007 and spent about 18 months there. Loved it there, learned a lot. Really grateful for everything that I got to be a part of, while I was there. And I left in 2009. They had done some restructuring at the beginning of 2009. The auto industry was not doing well as well, like just overall. That was like the middle of the financial collapse, and auto got hit hard on that, and they consolidated, I think it was 4 or 5 offices. And I got demoted a couple weeks before they laid off about 80 people. And I wasn't happy I got demoted. And then, I was like, okay, like, makes a little more sense when they laid off 80 people like 2 weeks later. Still wasn't happy about that. A lot of my friends were let go. Completely different perspective on it now. I think the gentleman that had to be responsible for that, on making those tough decisions, just went with who he knew. They didn't give him enough time to truly evaluate what was going on. And I'm sure he did his best. Being less than 2 years into the industry, and still in my mid-20s, I had a different viewpoint of it then than I do now. But I stayed for about 2 more months. I worked hard while I was there, but I started to take some interviews elsewhere, and ultimately end up leaving in April of 2009. Didn't end up getting into another role with a company. I interviewed a couple places. I think a couple people wanted to stay away from me because of my not compete, not solicit at the time. And, after 2 months of interviewing or so, by May of 2009, we started our own industrial staffing company and decided to do that. So did that, had a lot of success with that, was 50-50 partners for 4.5 years in that business. Had differences of opinions on how to grow it. And we may get into some of this today, we may not, but all of the stuff that I would say are the hot buttons on like how to set up a partnership properly, guess what? We did none of that. And that probably didn't help us sustain that partnership for the long term. But still, again, I learned a lot during that time. It was a great experience. I'm really grateful for what I was able to learn and do within that business, and a lot of good things were done. At the beginning of 2013, I wanted to go a different direction, and about 9 months later, we got that figured out, or I guess 11 months. But we started Spark in 2013, November of 2013. From there, it's been a lot of a lot of fun, a lot of hard work. But we started with one company, and it's expanded into a portfolio of 7 now. So we could talk about any of that you want to, but that's a quick synopsis of the background.
Love it. I do want to ask one more question because there's going to be people like, as you answer these questions, can you give us an overview of those 7, just about what industries you serve for our listeners as you start answering these questions? I know it's going to be something
Mhm.
forefront of their mind.
Yeah. So when we started out in 2013, I mean, one of the reasons that we uh, that happened right while we started a new business is because I wanted to do other sectors of staffing,
Mhm.
and I also was probably a little bit more aggressive on wanting to promote people. And I think in some aspects, both sides were right, because like we grew 800% our first full year in 2014, and that was awesome. And we went from a team of 5 to 20 in that year, and I think we were ready for that. Once we got to that point, we kind of outgrew our capacity for where we were actually at as professionals, as leaders. Like we just had to grow more ourselves, and we started to struggle with some of that. Like we still grew 100% the next year, but that's not 800%. Like, so that growth slowed down, and we had started to do some things. We just started to make mistakes, right? But
Mhm.
when we started Spark, we wanted to do technical staffing, we wanted to do professional staffing, as well as our skill trades and light industrial that we were doing. And we were not niche. And I know a lot of people preach the niches, and I think there's context to everything. I would agree with all those people, but I would also disagree. And so when we started it out, we had, by the time we were in our second year, I think we were working in like 10 or 11 different sectors. And if you fast forwarded to 2018, we were in 15 or 16 sectors. And some of that was great. And then some of that was we were too shallow in some of
Mhm.
those sectors, right? 2019, we're expanding and trying to diversify. So we're heavy in auto, being in the Detroit area, and that's great. But we like a big part of being in other sectors was to diversify, and we did some of that well. But we got up to about 9 offices in it was 9 in 2019, and we hadn't nailed that. Like we were doing some okay things, but like we didn't have it all figured out. And then you get to the Q1 of 2020, and when COVID hit, at first there was some real adversity for us on that. So the first couple months of that were tough. We had a lot of these small offices around the country, and we were in all these different sectors, right? And some of that was good because a couple of them stayed hiring or popped back quicker. But we just had a lot going on, and we weren't very far along in some of those areas. And so we learned a lot from that, but we ultimately started to let those offices, like we didn't renew the leases. A lot of them were on short term leases. And that's when we started to flip our model from decentralized, where we had offices all over the country, to a centralized model. And so that's really the time where we reflect on what we were doing. I started to talk with some other entrepreneurs in the space, and ultimately did some coaching with some people. And the short version of that is it led to our second company, um, which is Spark Packaging. And so we took over an 18-month period all our agreements that we had in that sector, and merged them into this new company. We didn't end up acquiring this company. It was doing about 250,000 in revenue. It was still losing money, but really liked the guys that were running it, and we're getting along well, and they were starting to implement some stuff, and they were on the track to profitability. And when we got ready to prepare for their 2021, and did like their vision planning thing. It looked a lot like our first year at Talent, like on what we wanted to try and do. And so we got to know each other pretty well. And long story short is we decided, hey, we're not going to buy this company because there's not really a value on it yet, even though there was no, wasn't making money. So we said, hey, let's create a new company. Let's take all your business and put it into the new company. And then we'll take our 30 agreements in this, area, and we'll phase them in. And it took us 18 months to do that. And it's been a big success for us. So I'll pause there. But that's kind of how the process of getting into some of these other companies and then having them specialize in sectors. That was the genesis of it.
Love it. You talked about that centralized model. And in our previous conversation, you talked about how beneficial that was. You just mentioned a few things, but were there other key drivers behind that strategic shift? I know you talked to some other people and the business models. Give me your thought process behind that, because that's a big change. That probably can create a lot of angst for someone thinking about that, and I'm sure others are thinking about stuff like that too today.
But I think everything's like timing's a huge aspect in everything, right? So we
Yeah.
had what was going on in 2020, and we didn't lay anyone off, but we also weren't hiring. And so in some of those offices that had either one or two people in them, which I don't necessarily recommend doing a ton of that, um, where we had that going on, when we're not hiring and then there's a lot of uncertainty in the world, what's going to happen? Well, some people might leave or not work out, or we had a lot of people that were doing well and other people that didn't do well, like over a 6-month period in like a more a setup like this where we're communicating this way. uh, but a lot of our team did well. And it's like, man, we can operate like this. We flipped all our daily stand-up meetings to doing them on, I think it was Zoom at the time. Now we use Teams. But we started to do more stuff like this. We started to have meetings this way with clients. And as that was happening, we didn't renew some of these leases. We were seeing that our operational expenses were dropping as well. And so that was kind of the start of it. It's like, hey, like this is working pretty well for us, and we definitely want to have a physical presence. Um, but we really like what we see here. And we ended up, even in our main office that we have in the Metro Detroit area, we went from an office that was about 8,100 square feet, and we opted out of the lease. We had an opt out on our lease, opt out of it, went down to about 2,200 square feet, which is really hard for me, probably more ego wise than anything. But like we're big on growth, and
Yeah.
it just wasn't, parts of that weren't fun, but
Yeah.
it was the right move at the time. And we dropped our, rent expense. And, we had a lot of the team working like this. And then we had sections of the team that were working in office. And we did that for the back half of 2020, all of 2021. And we really, in 2021, we really started to pick up steam on these moves that we're doing. I shared a couple of them. There were a lot more. But at the end of 2021, we bought a building, and we were able to then move in June of 22. And we've now, I think we've got about 12,000 square feet. And I was talking today about our next phase of our expansion, where we'll add, some more, because we're on certain days we're out of space, on certain days we have it right now. So
Good problem to have. When you look back at 2020, how many people did you
mhm.
have at the time on your teams?
I don't recall exactly if we were at this number in 2020, just off the top of my head. I know that what I do recall is that at some point in at least 19, we're at 51 people on our team. And we had reached record high performance in 2018, with
Mhm.
51. We held that number into 19. And at one point in 2020, again, we didn't lay anybody off, but we just didn't hire. And we were all the way down to 29 people, which was tough. It was really tough for a lot of reasons, but it was I mean, it was tough in the moment, but you're also just kind of moving forward and doing what you got to
Yeah.
do every day. And you're like kind of in it, but like, there's definitely tough moments about that.
Mhm.
Well, by the time we got to the end of 2021, we were doing more gross profit production uh, with 35 people than we did with 51.
That's
And
amazing.
that was eye opening for us. And where we really started I mean, it was happening probably already, but we were really like, hey, we're on to something with how we're operating now and how we are. I think we did a good job of how we qualify orders and how we evaluate business partnerships and structure agreements. But we got better at how we structured specific searches, said no to projects, who was doing what. As we're adding people, the ramp up speed to get them productive, and just we're using more data than going off of some data and some just kind of aggressive, like let's grow, more feelings. So we just got more mature, I guess, as a business on how we were looking to do that, and it was clear in the results.
That it sounds like you really focused on your efficiencies. And then when you get to that point, you move to that centralized approach. It impacted obviously your ability to scale from 29 to, I believe you told me you had 62 internal team members today. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're at 62. We just got to sign off on an offer last night, which is awesome. I also
Congrats.
think, I mean, just yeah, thank you. I mean, just being real, Friday was someone's last day as well, so I believe that I'm not a mathematician, but I'm pretty sure that keeps us at 62 for the moment.
Fair.
Um, and we're trying to get the right 67 on the team right now. We could probably delta that either way by a couple, and we lean towards. I'd rather say that intentionally, right? Because I it's not about getting to a X number of people just to say we're at X number of people. It's got to be the right people, and I would rather roll with less people and roll up our sleeves and go to work than be staffed up with people that don't fit the culture. Or I think we got that pretty honed in as far as at least like who at least has the potential to fit the culture. It's always a work in progress. Like people don't just come in a culture fit. You have to teach them about like everything within your business. If they're not a characteristics match, like someone can be a great person, they could embody a lot of our core values well, and they might like hopefully we have a good seat for them. But if we put them in the wrong area, they're going to fail. And so we
Yeah.
got to watch that too, especially as we're trying to, hey, I think where we failed early on, not completely, but was we'd say we need to be at 67 people and we'd run through a wall to get there and bend on some of that stuff, whether we would admit that or not. Looking back, I think that was some of the reality, and all that did was um, make it harder to uphold the values, the standards, and the client experience. And those are three very important things.
I love it. I don't even know if you've said it on this call yet, but I know you said it in our previous call. You mentioned gross profit increased by 3 times since 2020 for your growth. Talk to me about you obviously mentioned efficiencies. What other strategies, market conditions, efficiencies contributed to that growth? Because that's a huge number. Um, so talk to me about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could probably talk about this for like 8 hours and I won't bore you with that stuff. But I think number one was understanding, and we talked about this, I'll say it in a different way though, like understanding our gross profit per person, very important. Then also taking our ops team. And so one of the things that makes us different, as for our portfolio of companies, we create more economies of scale than we normally could at our size because we're able to work with one ops team for all of the entities at this point. And we have people that, that was built out of Spark Talent, which is still by far, the biggest organization at this point, even though we have multiple companies that are growing really well, and we're proud of everybody within the portfolio. But that team was built out of there. So as these other companies are growing, or as we add something in that, hey, this is trending to do $1 million in gross profit or whatever it may be, we're putting people into the mix from an operational standpoint that they they're already up to speed, with what's going on at that level. And a lot of times we can avoid mistakes that we made maybe early on. They become uh, part of what makes what we're doing a great investment. Like for the portfolio companies, is that we're taking all this time and things that we've learned and then implementing them earlier into the other businesses, which is helping us produce better profitability, more strategic growth, I would say, and just kind of keep us on track best practice wise. So that's been a huge thing, was just having that ops team be centralized and really turning it into a revenue center. That was a big It's not the only thing, but it was a big thing that shoot, we're that ops team for us. I don't mind sharing this. They'll probably this year we got it running out of a couple different areas. Probably about 700,000 in gross profit, out of that ops team. Which I mean, our top performer. I'm going to do something I hate doing. So I hate when people throw out numbers and you got to have the context, especially with our industry. It's like, oh, we run a $800,000 desk or something. Well, okay, wait, I got a couple more questions. Is it $800,000? Is it 800,000 gross profit, and they're doing that all full desk themselves, or is there them and recruiters involved? Because I would call that 400. If me and Kortney are doing 800,000 in business, we're at 400. So I just want to be careful, but like our best performers from a raw total, so like their portion of it. So if you and I were doing the placement, it was $10,000. We'd each have 5,000 on our raw total.
Correct.
Our best performers are going to do between 800 in gross profit, which is awesome. Not everybody's doing that, but we have people that are achieving that, and we hope to continue to develop more. Well, that ops team is basically performing like as a whole as another top performer like that, and they're doing all the things that we need to do operationally anyways to run the
I love
business.
that.
And it usually is a cash suck, but we've made it a cash flowing part of the business.
That's amazing. I love to hear that. And that's you have such amazing performers. That's wonderful. Another topic that you and I talked about before was your mission. Your
Mhm.
company's profitability improvement really connected. How's it connected to your core mission of creating opportunity for others? You mentioned that twice at some other point in time. I remember that.
Yeah.
So talk to me about that.
Well, I think we are big on what I call like a win-win-win scenario. And it goes in this order. It's got to be a win for the person that, like, from a placement standpoint. Let's focus on placements. Um, if Kortney calls me about a job and it's not good for me, it's not going to be a win for me, and that's going to kind of unravel everything, right? Because the clients ultimately, like, if we somehow I'm just like, you know what, I need a job or I need a change, so I'm going to take that job and then I'm going to leave in 2 months when I find something better. Well, I may get hired and there may be like an invoice that goes out initially, but what's going to happen is I'm going to leave. The client's going to be upset. It's probably not going to pass guarantee terms. And even if it does, if you're right on the line of that, I'd advise you to use some nuance with your clients because you want to focus on the lifetime value. And if, let's say, we got a 60-day guarantee and I quit on day 62, client's not going to have a great experience if you hold them to that. So I'm not saying don't honor your contracts, but you got to look at some stuff with nuance, right? So if we do that, if we kind of push someone into something that's not right for them, it's not going to be a win for them. Everything else unravels. Well, then also it could be a win for someone, but it's got to be a win for the client. It's got to be someone that can add value to the client. And only when those two things happen is a win for us. So in the searches we take and how we structure them, in who we place, where, when, and why, we try and do it with that as the focal point, knowing that like that's what's going to get us to, and it's the right thing to do, but it's also going to create repeat business, and hopefully
Mhm.
reoccurring revenue.
Yeah, we don't want to start from scratch every time. That's not fun. Too much work. Um,
No, so a general answer that would be it. That's what
okay.
I would say.
I
Yeah.
love it. And you really talked about focusing on clients. Now, I'm going to connect two things that you've said in this call so far. You talked about
Yeah.
your business has moved to opportunities like this, doing stuff virtually, but you talked about
Mhm.
being different for your clients. So let's talk about
Yeah.
the competitive differentiation. Spark Companies prides itself on understanding clients. I believe I saw at some point in time you really talked about face-to-face interaction. This is an increasingly digital world. AI is
Yeah.
here, all the tools are here, all the teams and
Yeah.
the Zooms and whatever. How does this approach? Are you doing more face to face? How are you handling that? And what is that competitive edge that it gives you based on your approach to that?
Yeah. So a couple things here, and you can just stop me if I get too long-winded. But
No.
your guys' CEO, I listened to a podcast with Aaron, your
Yeah.
guys' CEO, and he said this in a different way when he was talking about the use of AI and where you may be late versus like mixing in. I think the example he gave was CDs and vinyl records or something like that. And so different area, but think of that like face-to-face meeting as a example of that vinyl record. And so we're not going to ignore technology, right? This AI, all this different stuff that's going on. We're not going to ignore it. We want to find a way to use it as a tool to accentuate what we're able to do as a business, and then track that data to see if we're actually getting more efficient with the investments that we make. So we want to do that, but relationships are built in the inefficiencies, a lot of times. So is getting on site with a client inefficient? Well, it depends on how you look at it. It can be from a standpoint of we can just do this. There
Mhm.
are some efficiencies to this, but you're going to stand out. You're going to build more relationship. You're going to know more about what's going on. A lot of like we call it. I don't believe in luck. I believe in like just doing the right things and good things happen. So a lot of times when you're in a meeting and on site, you could be in one department and you get introduced to two other departments. And next thing you know, you walk out with openings from all the departments. Those things don't happen as much on a Teams call. And so it's good to be able to do this. And we do a lot of this, but we want to try and get out in front of clients. So where we have business units that are like regional and they're like physically in their area,
Mhm.
we want them out, in front of those clients. They can do this, but they have physical meeting expectations and things that we're looking at. Um, and then even on our national sales teams, like yeah, they do even more of this, right? But logistically, we like to make investments to get them out in front of clients,
Mhm.
and we're even looking at how to do that better to where we can kind of get that's an area where we're trying to improve, and we already do it a lot, but we're trying to put more data behind like what's a rhythm to do this. So maybe if you bring me back in a year, I'll have more thoughts on how we're doing that, but we're working on that right now.
It's a date. I'm gonna follow up. We're gonna talk about it because everybody like is questioning like, what should I do? How should I do it? How do I get faster? How do I get better? How do I use Chat
Hmm.
GPT differently? And in
Yeah.
reality, like I I was a trainer way back in the day, but I played sports. And we always had a
Okay.
word of the year. Like think about just reconnecting your focus. And my conversation for 2024 was the year of engagement. It's
Yeah.
really about engaging, and I don't think that's going to change a ton for 2025. Just to be in front. AI is noise. It's a necessity, but it's noise if it's used the right way, it's great. But I think that's going to continue. It's how do you stand out? How do you differentiate yourself? So you're gonna come back on it here.
The more we do stuff like this and the technology gets better and better, it's like we're probably all going to do that, or we
Yeah.
should. Otherwise, we're probably going to get swept away. But if you want to stand out, do some inefficient things. Do the things that people are becoming scared to do, which is have a face to like we're in recruiting, so we are really intentional about pushing our people, specifically our people that are just kind of coming in, getting started, and you know, maybe they've had one job before this and they've never worked in an office environment, or they've never been in a face-to-face meeting, and like something that like when we started recruiting, you'd be like, man, like I can't even imagine that. And now it's
Yeah.
a real thing when we're trying to, our purpose of the company is to help people grow, and
Mhm.
growth is uncomfortable. That's one of the things that makes us not a fit for everybody, is that we're going to push people to be better professionals, and also we hope better people.
Yep.
And we think those things can coincide, especially if you're going to be a leader. Like you have to set good examples with how you operate and the acumen of what you do, but also how you operate as a person and a
Mhm.
human and your character. And so, um, if someone's coming in and we're in the people business and they're scared to get in front of a person, well, either we have to, hopefully they're coachable, right? And we got to work with them on
Yep.
that, right? And if they just were really resistant to us, then they probably don't match the characteristics, or there's probably some real niched in areas that we got to try and use that person in to be a fit on our team. But we're really trying to get, it's like, yeah, this, we're using all this different stuff, but it's like, yeah, like, but go do this too. Like get out, like go to this customer site and meet with these people. So
I love it.
that's our approach.
We'll talk more in a year. We'll see how it went. for you.
Yes.
I want to look at forward-looking strategy. Obviously,
Yep.
the end of the year, it's really when you're assessing what you're doing, your planning sessions. I just got back from one yesterday. So I
Yeah.
want you to reflect on your lessons from 2023, 2024. What are the most significant changes that you're implementing in your business model for 2025?
Yeah. So will the evolution of our portfolio kind of work like ever since we've had the companies, they've worked together, but the each year we've got them more integrated, right? And so when we first started, we had different sets of core values. And
Okay.
then the first thing we switched was it's like, man, now I think we had four companies at the time. And I'm like, I can't keep track of all the core. Like they were all, the way we explained it first was like, hey, we have different sets of core values, but these are all principles that we believe in. And next thing you know, we got four of them. And I'm because we want to coach, develop, um, train, hire, fire, like everything we do, we want to tie it to a core value. And it's like, man, I'm struggling with this because we got too many. Um, so we talked about that as a group at the end of 22, and we decided to um, use the same eight core values throughout the portfolio. And that worked because we all agreed that like all of these core values were great. Like we believed in the principles.
Mhm.
We just found that hey, these eight are the ones that were actually communicating in real life. Like they're not just up on the wall, they're in our everyday conversations. They're being explained like, hey, why do we believe in face-to-face communication? Well, because we're people driven, service focused, and part of being people driven is talking to people in person.
Yeah.
So just an example, right? So we do that, and then at the beginning of 24, I think what really helped with our growth this year, where a lot of companies are not growing this year, there are some, and that's awesome. But like overall as an industry, I was just with one of the big five, a person from the big five, and they're down 12% this year. And that's pretty much right across the board. We're going to be up around 20. We wanted to be up 100. So we have, plenty of areas to improve.
Hmm.
But all things considered, in the last 2 years, where we're up, about 40% on our overall in the last 2 years, and most people are down 20 to 30%. It's like, okay,
Hmm.
we're scooping up market share and we got work to do, but I like what we're doing.
Yeah.
Well, what we integrated at the beginning of this year is we decided we were going to all like we did one team meeting, so we bring everyone together. It's okay, we're working in essentially different business units. Yes, some of them are different LLCs and all this stuff, but we're all working together as a team, and we have unique strengths, gifts, specialties that we bring to the table. And so what's worked really well for us is to focus on teamwork and owning our areas and selling our wheel of services, where it's like, hey, like if we're doing industrial staffing somewhere and they have IT openings, it's not going to be our industrial staffing you know team that is going to fill those. They might have the relationship. Let's make the intro to our IT staffing and search company and let them go do a great job. And stuff like that, where we're getting more integrated and more
Yeah.
saturated in the client base, is what's really pushed us forward this year. So that's been our theme and our difference maker, is that when we go sell or when I'm on a meeting, I'm not the expert. We're gonna figure out, our business dev team's trying to set a meeting, and then we want to get our experts in there to talk with the right people in the right areas, and hopefully that's multiple conversations, right, which leads to multiple opportunities to work with the client, which we believe is a way that we add value to the client relationship, and that's one of our core values is find a way to deliver value. So that's a way we've figured out how to do that.
That's amazing. And honestly, it's your way to be everything to everyone by integrating those companies. You're their one-stop shop for all things that they need, it seems like.
Well, and I think you learn from that on failure, because the truth is we can't be everything to everyone, and that's
True.
part of my. It's just the truth, but that would
Yeah.
be part. Like, hey, here's what makes us different. Like, I basically now sell against what we used to be, which is we tried to be everything to everybody.
True.
And hey, you know what? It's impossible for us to be good at everything. That's why we have these different
Yeah.
niched out areas and teams. And the reason we do them as companies is because I'm an entrepreneur. we do it for multiple reasons. It's great for internal recruiting,
Hmm.
retention. Like some people, I think the stats are like 93% are better entrepreneurs than entrepreneurs, something like that. But there's still that 7% that have that itch. It's a fragmented industry that happens. I want to keep those people.
Yeah.
A couple of our companies are organic startups that they're people that worked at, talent, and they've achieved some things and they have that itch. It's on their vision. And over time, we implemented how they could take that over, and either they had equity right out of the gate, or they had the ability to earn it through performance, and being aligned with the core values over a period of time. And it's razor specific on what they have to do. That's worked really well for us. So I can go to that client, say, "Here's our expert," but I don't have an expert that is putting in 30 hours a week. That expert's got skin in the game. Now some of the teams are bigger. There's other people on the team too. Not everyone necessarily has equity, but that's worked better for me to
Mhm.
have the people that are that I'm working with more day to day also have some skin in the game with what they're doing. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs care about what they're doing as well. And I'm not again, I think that's better for most people. And a lot of our entrepreneurs make more money than some of our entrepreneurs right now because of the size and scope of what they're doing. But when people have skin in the game, it's worked better for us to kind of do that handoff, and they own it and they crush it for the client.
I love what that does for your internal team. And I this is not something you prepared or we talked about, but your internal retention numbers that has to impact that. I mean, our industry in general has huge turnover. Average, I
Yeah.
think, is a 3 year. So I'm assuming that has done wonders for your internal retention for your team.
It really has. And that's what, we can't, I think we'll cross over 4,000 opportunities created this year. Our big, mission is to do over 100,000 in a year. So we're going to be 4% of the way there. Like, that's great, that we've
Yeah.
done that. And I'm proud of the team and happy that, like, if we're growing and on the tracks towards that, like, that's a good thing. But the truth is, we got a long way to go. And so we have
Mhm.
to build a bigger, better team, and we have to all keep getting better as well. Like, we just have to build something bigger and better, and that's gonna require us to implement great operations tools and technology. But we are gonna still bet on great people being a huge part of that.
I love it. So you talked scale. We talked what
Yep.
what is the future? You're only a percentage of the way there. Talk to me
Yep.
about what your biggest challenges you anticipate in scaling your organization over the next 2 to 3 years. What do you think your biggest challenges are gonna be?
It's a great question. I got to tell you, I don't know for sure, just because of how fast technology is going. Now, I don't overall view it as a threat, but I like to have control and have an idea, and in that area, I think we're all just. If anyone told you they know exactly what that's going to look like in 3 years, I think they're lying. So
Absolutely.
um, that's just me being honest, that's an area that, like, I don't feel that we have this complete control over. I'm not freaking out about it or anything like that, but I think there are going to be huge opportunities within that. Also, maybe some challenges to watch out for. I think just trying to be educated and listening to stuff like your podcast or Ben Mina, who you just had on, and he's got like the AI summit. And, I mean, we literally have a person that watched this whole summit, and they've sent me an analysis of this whole thing. And we're kind of like, look, we got a short list of tools that we might test out in 25. So we like to test stuff out, like beta test it before going all in and just seeing, do we like it? Do we like it, but we can't get a use case? Hey, I think I heard this in the podcast with Aaron, but it's like sometimes something will get brought to us. It's like, we already got that over here. Like, you guys aren't using it. Like, no, use what we have, and then we'll evaluate that. And if we don't like it, maybe we'll flip it. But like, so there's just stuff with that. But overall for me, this whole year, we didn't add to the, like, we had our media company at the beginning of the year. The year before, we added four companies in a 6 month span. And that was fun. It was crazy, but it was it was fun to the portfolio. And we didn't do that this year because we were focused now on kind of getting some of these ones that were organic off the ground.
Mhm.
The media thing was brand new for us. None of us have ever done it. We're still learning every day. EJ and Chris are awesome. Like they know way more about this stuff than I do, but I'm also learning.
Yeah.
But they're definitely the experts. But like we've been in a season where we're just trying to improve and put infrastructure behind those 7 businesses. When I look out, big picture, I believe we're going to have 13 companies within the portfolio that will own some of these other sectors. So we're at 7 right now. So that would mean we'd add another 6. I'm starting up conversations on that again, moving into 25. We have talked to some people this year, but we've probably turned down about 100 different situations, and I think that's good because you got to vet stuff out.
Yeah.
Um, I'm hopeful that we'll get to the point where we add another one this year. But I love my wife. She's awesome, and she's like, when we did the 4 in 6 months, like that sounds good on the podcast. But she's like, hey, do you think you're making the same mistakes that you talk about with going up to 9 offices? And I told her why I don't feel that way because of the gross profit production and how those are set up and some of the things that we talked about and the fact that we already have this business inside of some of our client base, but we need the expertise to go after it.
Yeah.
And we're not, same ops team, same centralized. Like, there's reasons why I don't feel that way, but I love for saying that, right? Because that was a point of evaluation for us at the beginning of this year. Is like, hey, like we need to be good stewards to the companies that we have. Some of these are organic. We gotta get them moving. We got to get them contributing. We got to get them in front of the client base and get some of the um, it's nice to say that. Actually executing it is something different, right? So we got to work on that. But now I'm hopeful moving into next year we'll add at least one. I don't think we'll add more because we're still working on some of those things I just said. But we're having a couple conversations and they all kind of lead to one sector. And I don't know. I just think all in God's time, but He's got something to do with it when all these things start to kind of come together, and we'll see what happens. So we're not in a rush, but hopefully in the next year we'll be able to say we have 8, and we can talk a little bit more about that.
I'll be patiently waiting. I won't make you commit to anything, but I'll be patiently waiting on the side, just watching to see what happens.
Yeah,
I love it. Um, I'm going to go back to something you talked about technology. Now, my question
yeah,
to you is, do you have a team that's evaluating technology in your ops team? Are they doing that? Or, I mean,
correct.
there is things
Yep.
coming at you left and right. How are you guys evaluating? Do you have a team? Do you have a person? How do you manage it?
Yeah, so we have a champion for different areas. So there's a couple of different people that are evaluating different things, but we always try and have a champion for it because we
Okay.
found when we don't, and we're not perfect on that either. Like I have an email that went out last week, and we use Monday.com. That's one of the things that our ops team, not everyone on the team use it, but our ops
Yeah.
team does, and they love it. Our vice president of operations is like, I just got this like vibe board and I put my Monday app up, and she's like in my office, like tinkering around with it and stuff. Um, but so we do a lot of our like project management. We do a lot out of there. But for me, like I look at where we're at on projects, right? And
Hmm.
so we were looking on this Monday board, and like 2 of our projects that we had didn't have a champion on it, and that's an issue for me because from my experience, what happens when 8 people are on it and they're all responsible is things don't get done. So maybe that works for other people, but like that's big for us that we have a couple different people doing this because there's so much like that you can look at. But it's important for me that one of our operations managers or our vice president of operations, or if it has a financial twist, maybe our controller, like someone's got to be the champion on that. That is like
Hmm.
they're responsible for project deadlines, evaluation, whatever data we need, working with the data analysts to spit out, good information on if we implement something, how it's going.
Amazing. Let's face it, there's no shortage of tools that are coming out. So making
No,
sure they do what we need them to do, and we're keeping our teams as efficient as possible is key for us.
it can be
I,
overwhelming, I think, for all of us.
I'm coming to your office to use that vibe board for Monday. I saw you
Come on,
post it.
come
I was like,
on.
ooh,
Yeah, yeah, come on out.
I love it. I'm going to ask two more questions, and that'll
Okay.
wrap up our conversation. Let's talk for our listeners that are similar size of you. They're struggling to
Mhm.
grow. They don't know what to do. Looking at 2025, what's one piece of advice you would give them going into 2025?
Uh, it's hard to give one piece because there's so much
Give five.
context on what someone's struggling. But I would say, the first place I would look is at client experience
Okay.
and then lifetime value of a client. So are you making a placement and then never working with the client again? Or do you have clients that I guess, yeah, you've worked with for a long time, yeah, but like how much repeat business are you able to get with them? And before you go, I'm not saying don't add new customers,
Yeah.
but the first place that I would look is like, are we doing a good job on client experience with our current client base? I think a lot of that comes back to, are we getting repeat business or not? Now, if you're doing a great job and you're not getting repeat business, then you got more of a prospecting issue on like, are we going after the right target clients for our business? Because if we might take a search that is a one-off or something like that, but if there's not reoccurring business, we're having to restart the process. We're slowing down the speed because every new client, like, there's context to this, but like in general, a new client versus a repeat client, it's going to take longer to work through the process with a new client. You're potentially, then you think about candidate experience. You're more at risk to have a bad candidate experience with a new process than something that you've already done, multiple times, right? So both from the client side and the candidate side, if I can get reoccurring or repeat business going, I'm set up to get the most efficiency from a business aspect, and kind of control what's going on with the experience from the candidate side because I'm more familiar with it. So that's the first place I would look. um the second place, and this is just me being me, if I'm niche, I would consider, and I'm in a down year because my industry's down. Well, that's not acceptable to me. And if you got to decide, do you want a lifestyle business and your lifestyle is going to go up and down based on how that's going, or do you want to build something sustainable and something that you can find your way to grow regardless of what's going on, across the board? And we're in a $250 billion industry. So does it actually apply that your business is down because the market's down when there's $250 billion of market share? Probably not. I know it doesn't for us. So if we're talking to companies that are about the same size, that's not an acceptable answer for someone that's running one of our business units. We got to figure it out. But
Mhm.
so what do we do? Well, we have different sectors, that people work in, right? But you also have different service lines that you could consider. So maybe you stay within the niche. Well, what are you doing for the customer? Are you doing all direct placement? Well, that's going to be your first issue with reoccurring or repeat business, is that they're not hot on direct hire business. They might love you to death, but there's nothing for you to do. So
Mhm.
that's where, within our portfolio, where it makes sense. Not every business, but I think four of them, we do contract staffing as well to get reoccurring going. And then in the ones where we don't do contract staffing, we're doing other reoccurring, forms of SOW type work. There's got to be a reoccurring aspect to your business. So if you take anything away and you're in that, boat, you want to stay in one sector, well, figure out how to put some other service lines into your business. We provide more value to a customer than just filling the spot. You know a lot about the market, you know a lot about hiring, you know a lot about uh, growing or reducing departments, when to do that. We have a lot of data that we can use and add value to clients on. So I'd recommend thinking about that and getting it implemented in your business.
I love it. Great piece of advice. Anything else?
Man, I love what we do. It's awesome. It's been an interesting couple of years, but I love it. I would encourage anybody that is doing great to keep focus on being the best version of yourself. Right? We can, I think where we can run into the biggest trouble is sometimes when we have success and think we got it all figured out, right? So I know for us with newer recruiters or someone that, the first contest, that's a time where we got to really put our arm around someone and be a good mentor to them. And the core values become really important to us because um, some people will work hard for a little bit and then think they're smart, they got it all figured out, and it's work smarter, not harder. And I think at some level that is actually true. That's probably like in the billions. So we're more like, hey, you got to do both. And like it does evolve, but like you got to be careful on, you want to evolve, do new things, push limits. Like roles may change as you grow, but if you get completely away from the things that brought you to the dance, you're probably going to run into some issues. And so we really watch that with our top performers, is how are they mentally doing, with that stuff. Because in this time of year especially, they could have a great year, well, you got to kind of gear up and do it again. Now it helps if you have reoccurring revenue, but it's just an ongoing thing. So I would encourage people that maybe are going through some challenges, that your opportunities are within those challenges. And I would challenge the people that are doing well to just keep focused on being the best version of yourself and getting better every day.
I love it. I know this is my last question, I promise. I could continue to ask you questions all day long. I know you don't have a crystal ball,
Yes.
but if you're looking ahead in the staffing and recruiting industry in the next 3 to 5 years, what do you foresee changing in the next 3 to 5? Very, very broad question, I know.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm the most qualified to answer this. And if you ask this to other people, I'll definitely be listening. But my opinion would be that the tools and how we kind of get to the call or the conversation may look a lot different, 5 years from now than it does now. I still believe, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but we're going to bet on that endpoint conversation or interaction is going to be vital. It's going to be at a premium. That it's going to continue to be um, like it's really an art form of how to do that right. And the better you are at that, the more that you're going to succeed. As long as you don't if someone's going to think they're going to do that and not use the tools on their belt, I think they'll struggle. But if they use the tools on their belt and they really hone that art form, they're going to stand out from the person that wants to just send an whatever it is at the time. It probably won't be an automated message. It'll be something different, but or it'll look different than it does now. But that's my answer. So it's embracing that stuff and really working on your craft, which is ultimately to be a connector of people.
I think that's a great piece of advice. This is an ever-changing industry that has very foundational blocks that haven't changed over the years, just the tools in which we get there, or the device in which we travel to get there. So I love that, and it's truly about what all got into it from the beginning was people to help people. So I love that, and I think that's a great piece of advice, and you're right, 3 to 5 years from now, who knows? So Aaron,
Can
anything
I share
else?
one more thing? Yeah, I'll share
Yes,
one
you
more thing on that.
may.
So like in this, I think this applies. I guess we'll see. Um, Here's an opportunity I see. You talk about the market share, and I mentioned that I was just in a conversation with someone that's working at the top five. I've actually been in a lot of those conversations. Why? Because we want people from those top five that don't want to be at those top five anymore. We want them here with us to build that out. And there's heavy investments going into these areas, specifically within those companies. And I think that's probably warranted, and we should all take note of that. But also, those companies are so big that the people making those decisions are somewhat disconnected from what's happening on the ground floor. And so I think that it's just my opinion from what I've heard, but there's going to an opportunity for a growing recruiting firm is going to be to embrace all that stuff but not be in a spot where they're going to try and overrun what the team Starbucks CEO has a book. He talks about this. He's like, let the people that use sweep the floors pick the broom. And from what I hear, I think maybe that's not going on at some of those bigger companies right now. There's decisions being made at a higher level. And I think they probably make a lot of sense, other than maybe they should be listening to some of the people that are actually on, that are going to be sweeping the floor. I know we don't probably sweep the floor like when we're going into a client meeting, but you get my point. So, for me, it's trying to embrace that. I think it was Howard Schultz, but it's like, hey, like, let's listen to what is happening, out there. We don't want to avoid this stuff, but like, how do we keep our personal touch? How do we put our arms around, our young account recruiting managers and recruiters, and teach them the art form of this business along with the tools? So that's what we're going to focus on, and we're going to bet heavily on that. And I guess we'll find out who's right.
I love it. Aaron, this was such a wonderful conversation. I love all the things that you're doing over at Spark. And I'm excited for us to resume this conversation in a year from now to see how things are going, what has changed, and the growth that you're seeing, continuing to see. So thank you so much for your time today. I know that this is amazing for our listeners and the changes that you've made over the last 5 years. 4 years since 2020, and in the 13 years that you've been there. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
your time and your wonderful insights, and I greatly appreciate it.
Kortney, thank you.